Yes, I mean, and it's unusual that we'd have these temperatures. This is coming up on the third weekend in November. Usually we're happy to get one good weekend in November. You know, if we get two, we're really happy. This is going to be three. So, yeah, it's very weird, and, you know, it's been sunny, clear skies, light wind, you know, beautiful conditions for people to come out, sit outside, enjoy lunch and a couple bottles of wine. Well, in terms of, I saw what farming was like from the grounds up, and it's not as romantic as you would think. Even grape growing isn't all that romantic. You're reliant on the weather. You're reliant on rainfall and temperatures and everything else. So I had an interest in aviation. So I studied to become a airline pilot and went to work for TWA. And so I left California, came to St. Louis, and I started flying initially domestically, and then I moved to New York and flew to Europe, Western Europe and the Middle East, 27 years. I started flying in 65. Yeah, everything, and actually that's one of the reasons I stopped flying was because of the changes in the industry. You know, terrorism changed things a lot, and you know, 9/11 changed everything very drastically. Well, I think what got me, you know, if there's an epiphany moment, you know, it was when I was flying in Western Europe, and you know, in the old days of flying, you'd actually fly over to Paris or Frankfurt, and you'd have 2 days off. And so what I always enjoy doing is, you know, I mean, initially you'd want to visit the sites in the town, but then after that I wanted to get out in the countryside, and I enjoyed wine anyway. And so I wanted to taste the wines in these little villages that I'd only heard about, you know, reading. And it was amazing because you'd go to one village and you'd taste their wines, and they were very proud of their wines, and they said, you know, we make the best wines in the world, you know. And then you'd go 3 kilometers and they'd say, well, we make the best wines in the world, and this is why. And I said, well, you know, that's funny. I was just over at such and such a town, and they said they made the best wines in the world. No way, you know. And these wines were all a little bit different, you know. I mean, some of it had to do with the soil, some of it had to do with the exposure to the sun, you know, the slope on the vineyards, where it was in relation to the ocean or to a river. But a lot of it was just these people have been making wines there for 1,000 years, and it was passed on from one generation to another. And you know, the times that I was visiting these vineyards, the technology was just starting to change as far as winemaking and grape growing was going. So that would have been in the 70s. And prior to that, especially in Europe and France and Germany and Spain and Italy, things were done in a classic manner. You know, it was passed on from one generation to another. You know, in France or Germany, if you don't own ground, you're not going to be able to buy it, you know, not very easily. So these vineyards were passed on, and so was the way to do it. And it wasn't so much as a scientific method. It was more of a tasting and looking and feeling, and having done it the same way year after year after year, they had it down. They didn't have the science down, but they had the winemaking down.
A lot of heart and soul.
Exactly. And each wine was a little bit different. You know, I mean, it wasn't where people were trying to design a wine that everybody in the world is going to like. They were trying to design a wine that everybody in that village was going to like. and they were going to like, because, I mean, globalization hadn't really started very much. And so their markets were all local, and they had to please the local people, and they built a brand over, hundreds of years, and continued to make wine that way.
And you got to peek in on what was going on.
Exactly, and it was fascinating, I mean, and to taste wines that were all a little bit different, and that's what fascinated me. When this resurgence started, there was a lot of money available to, educate yourself. So there was a lot of seminars. There was a lot of people that were coming in from California, from all over the world, to help us learn, about winemaking and grape growing and stuff like that. And so I really got involved in that. I took as many courses as I could. Went to California, took some courses, more or less short courses, dealing with specific areas of winemaking. And I started looking at a place to build a winery and plant grapes and stuff like that. And when I looked at the price of land in Missouri as opposed to the price of land in California, it was a no-brainer. I didn't have the money to start a winery in California. That's what I decided to do, and it was, and not only that, but it was the challenge. It was. I really think that we can make good wines with the grapes that can grow in Missouri. I think that the Norton grape, or the Cynthiana grape, as it's sometimes called, had a lot of potential. I mean, I tasted the early wines that were made from these grapes, and I thought, if somebody worked on this a little bit more, they could produce something really nice. And the French-American hybrids were producing fairly nice wines, and so I decided to give it a go. I mean, try to make something out of an emerging wine area. I opened up my first winery in 1980. This is not my first winery. Right, that's correct. That was my second winery. My first winery was a winery in St. Charles, Missouri.